Welcome everyone to Dropkick DiSKussions presented by Sportskeeda. I'm Korey Gunz. Thank you for tuning in, and a big thank you to everyone who listened to our SummerSlam preview show last week that I did with Tom Collahue. We posted the show Friday night or Saturday morning, depending on where you are in the world and where you're listening. And by SummerSlam time on Sunday night, it had done over 1,000 listens on the Sportskeeda YouTube channel. So we appreciate everybody listening to that, and hope you liked what you heard. And thanks to the success of that show, myself and Tom are hoping to bring you even more content each week here on Dropkick DiSKussions. If you haven't already, I want to remind you to subscribe to the Sportskeeda Wrestling channel on YouTube so that when we post new Dropkick DiSKussions, whether it's with myself or Tom or even my guest with me today, you'll get those notifications and you can check out the shows as soon as they get posted onto the YouTube channel. Today for Dropkick DiSKussions, I'm joined by Gary Cassidy. Gary, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Appreciate you joining me today.
No, thanks for having me on, man.
Well, we're going to be talking today a topic that I think most people have been talking about ever since Sunday night, ever since SummerSlam, and that is the Fiend Bray Wyatt, this new character that we saw officially debut or maybe re-debut Sunday night at SummerSlam against Finn Balor, and has just the wrestling world talking for a variety of reasons. So today me and Gary thought we'd sit down and just kind of talk about our thoughts about this character and what we thought of it. And Gary, I think if you're talking about Sunday night at SummerSlam and you're talking about the Fiend, I think it has to start right at the beginning, which was the entrance. When the Fiend entered the arena, I think everybody was curious about what the presentation was going to look like, what type of entrance, what we're really going to see from this Fiend persona. And then right from the get-go, I know for me it grabbed my attention right from the beginning and really started with the theme music, which sounded somewhat familiar, but has got a new twist on it.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. Well, I was actually saying to one of my friends a few days ago that my favourite thing about the whole entrance was for the weeks and weeks on the build-up to SummerSlam, I was watching, and obviously I was hooked on everything Bray Wyatt was doing, but I'm not sure how they're going to do an entrance and make this anywhere near as effective as they had been doing with him just appearing in the ring. My favourite thing, going back maybe almost 20 years now about wrestling when I was a kid, was actually the Brood and their entrance. And I think the Bray Wyatt one, the Fiend, his entrance just took me way back to that. And I feel like, the music was perfect. The lighting treatment he got was perfect. And I think it's the one thing, maybe apart from the 24/7 championship, although I think this is better than that, but it's the one thing in WWE right now that you can say they're doing absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, when the music first hit, I'll be honest, and don't get me wrong, I think it's an awesome remix of Bray's old theme. But when it first came on, I was a little bit surprised that they were doing a remix of the old theme. I thought that maybe they would take this as a brand new persona and character and not really a new version of Bray Wyatt. And obviously the Fiend is its own entity. So I was a little bit surprised that they had just done a kind of a death metal cover of his old theme. So I wasn't really sure how I liked that to begin with. Same thing with the Lantern. When he first started coming out with the Lantern, I thought, this is kind of too similar to Bray Wyatt. But then I will say when I saw the Lantern and what the presentation of the Lantern itself, that was everything. That was like, I was like, okay, I can get behind this if this is kind of the direction or maybe the symbolism behind some of this stuff. So the music I was maybe a little bit iffy about, or maybe would have liked to see something different, but the Lantern definitely blew me away.
Yeah, I believe I may have actually been convincing myself that I like the music, but because everything else is perfect, I think that's why I like it. Although the one thing I was actually kind of expecting, I don't know if you've seen a few months ago, Bray Wyatt had actually tweeted that he wanted to use the Slipknot song Unsainted for his theme tune, but it ended up being the NXT TakeOver soundtrack, which I guess, I don't know if that was already in place and that's why they didn't use the Bray Wyatt one. But the reason I think the music works so well, and of course with the Lantern, repackaging, I think it's such a, I mean, we all seen with the Emelina thing that repackaging doesn't always work, and I think maybe for the most part it only works when you completely ignore everything that's come before the character that you're presenting.
Right.
But I believe the Bray Wyatt one, the way it works so well, and I actually believe WWE tweeted about it saying simply the word evolve with the photo of the lantern. But I think the music, just because as a remix by Code Orange, who do the Aleister Black theme tune as well, but I think because as a remix, it goes hand in hand with the lantern being the old Bray Wyatt, and that linking back to the chainsawing the head off the cardboard statue and stuff like that. I feel like they have presented this, like, I wouldn't say overly complex story, but I think that the way they're doing it, they're presenting a story where we're either finding out things about it or we're maybe just linking things up. And I think the music was maybe just to help that along. Because I don't know if you've seen the... I only discovered this the day after SummerSlam, funnily enough, where Bray Wyatt back in 2015 had done a YouTube exclusive for WWE called Ghost Stories, I believe it was. And he spoke in that about... it was called The Man in the Woods. And what he done was he pretty much stood almost like a promo, but it was more like just someone telling a horror story. And he spoke about going into the woods, and there was this monster there who confronted him, who he named at the time the Man in the Woods. But this character he described as having what was it? Zero pigmentation in his skin, face pale as a pearl, yellow hair is, I think it was down to his knees or something, but he said long yellow hair, and they said cat-like yellow eyes, and from that alone you're going, oh, that sounds a little bit familiar,
right.
considering the character Bray Wyatt is just now is the Fiend. So I feel like the complexity of the character, people are still figuring out, and I think that again, it could be a coincidence. It could be Bray Wyatt planting the seeds back in 2015 for this character. Who knows? But I feel like the music and the lantern just help along the story of evolution and the character not being a repackage and not a let's forget about original Bray Wyatt, but rather this is what he was, and this is something that was inside him that has come out through his reformation, if you want to call it that, into the Firefly Funhouse presenter. So I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm talking myself into being absolutely 100% all in with the character, but I feel like the music and the lantern and just everything, the way the presentation was on Sunday, it's just 100% left me wanting more. And no matter what else happens in WWE right now or for the next few weeks, I'm going to be watching every second of it just to see what the Fiend does and who the Fiend attacks next.
Yeah, I think there's so much depth I think they could get into the character, so many layers like you alluded to that they could, different dots you could connect and different things that they could go and directions they could go. And I think it would seem that Bray himself has, just like you said with the ghost story, thing in 2015, it would seem that Bray himself has a lot of say or creative input in the way this character has been presented and the way it's going. And if that's the case, I have full confidence in if they continue to allow him to really put himself into this character and be a driving force for the creative, I think that it has to succeed. I mean, I think that, and I think he was, behind a lot of even just the early Bray Wyatt stuff. That was a lot of his ideas and his creativeness, and that was a success. I think people have even said that a lot of people would probably have the opinion that they could have done more with that character originally than what they did. So if they're letting him, be a driving force and kind of make decisions and have input on what the character is, I think it's going to be a winner. Like I said, The entrance was great. The music, I do think that maybe they decided to use the old Bray Wyatt theme, just kind of remixed, so that they didn't lose the Firefly entrance, the cell phone lights in the crowd, which I think looked awesome on Sunday. So if that's the reason, I can get behind that, to still encourage the crowd to participate in the entrance like they did. So I can get maybe why they did that. And I think the entrance, like you said, the character has me interested. I watch Raw and SmackDown to see what he's going to do next, whether it's a Firefly Funhouse vignette, whether he's going to attack somebody. I'm looking to see him on the show, and I think the entrance is just an extension of that. I compare it to the Undertaker's entrance, where when the Undertaker's in a match, the entrance may be better than the match is, but I would still pay. But I would still pay money just to be there in person to experience the entrance. And I think the same could be said with the Fiend character.
Yeah, well, I went to, being from Scotland, there's not a huge amount of WWE events here. We did have a Raw and SmackDown a couple years ago televised, but the first event I went to here was actually purely to experience the Fireflies, because I was such a huge Bray Wyatt fan at the time. And I still think, at least 100% in terms of wrestling shows, it is the single best thing I've seen live, and I would rank it up there with the experience of crowd interaction with live bands I've seen and stuff like that, and even with football matches and stuff. I think it's just it was one of those things. Everything else, there was so much pressure on that the entrance on Sunday and the match that I completely forgot that the Fireflies would be a thing. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, I was just like, oh man, I'm so glad that, when you say that they've used the music maybe for that would make a lot of sense. It's something I didn't even think of. But I think if that is the reason, then 100% all in with that, and keep the Fireflies coming. And I don't know if you've seen anything about the lyrics that accompany the new song. They're of course very, very similar to the old song, but there's a few little nuances that are put in there for the Fiend character, and it's 5 words that are repeated through it, and it's let me in and hurt, heal, that are just in the background of it. And I actually think that the aim might be to have the WWE Universe maybe doing the hurt, heal along with a little background bit. And if that all goes in with the Fireflies and the entrance, I just think it'll be one of the best entrances in WWE history, never mind today. Because the thing that I said the other day with the entrance being so dark, obviously it kind of nudges the WWE Universe to do the Firefly thing, but the Undertaker's got a dark entrance. I love the Undertaker's entrance, I'll never take anything away from it, but it's nice that Bray Wyatt has this one unique thing that no one else has, the Fireflies, and I don't think they ever will. I hope they never will. But I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the song, and I just think that the entrance for me, I was just blown away by it. So I hope that it continues, but on the other hand, I hope we don't see it too often. I would like the random attacks to just continue over the next few weeks. And I actually believe that it might be better if Bray Wyatt never wrestles on SmackDown or Raw and only ever wrestles on pay-per-views. But we'll see how it goes. Right now I want a lot more of him, but at the same time I want to only see a little bit of him so that it leaves me wanting more with it.
Yeah, and I think maybe just today, WWE released the theme song on YouTube, the official track. So if you want to check that out and hear some of those kind of nuances and differences that Gary's talking about compared to the old theme, you can probably find that on YouTube or other social media, because like I said, I think WWE officially released the track today. So let's talk about, now we get past the entrance, let's talk about the in-ring presentation. So you've got this big entrance, everybody's eyes are glued to the screen, they're glued to the ring, and I think most people were also interested about the in-ring presentation. The main thing to me was the fact that he wrestled in the mask. I know even last week in our SummerSlam preview show, when I asked Tom if he thought that Bray Wyatt would wrestle in the mask, and he said no. He said that it would probably be too difficult, and he didn't think that Bray would actually wrestle in the mask, but then lo and behold, that's exactly what he did on Sunday. Were you surprised to see him wrestling in the mask, and do you think that that helps or maybe takes away from the character because you can't see Bray's facials and the expressions he makes, which were some of his calling cards back in his previous days as Bray Wyatt, but obviously the mask is just such a showstopper, just obviously you can't look away from it. So do you think it helps or hurts that he's wrestling in the mask?
I like the little help or hurt there. It's like the hurt or heel that Bray has on his gloves. But yeah, I actually wasn't surprised. I think I'd have been really disappointed had he not wrestled in the mask. I mean, I don't know, it might have worked anyway just because everything else is great about the character. But I think, obviously, a lot of people have wrestled in masks. Kane would be the one that comes to mind when thinking about Bray Wyatt. But it's interesting that you say that about facial expressions because two of my favourite masked wrestlers of all time are actually kind of recent ones who now both wrestle without masks on. And that would be two Lucha Underground stars. It's Ricochet as Prince Puma and Lucha Underground, and it was Killshot, who is Shane Strickland, now Isaiah Scott in WWE. And I always say, like, with them now, I can't believe that I watched them for so long with masks on, because how hard is it to sell injuries and sell an opponent's offense in a mask? But I think the reason it works so well for this new Fiend character is because he doesn't need to really sell much right now. I mean, we'll see how that goes in the future, and I hope that he does remain like a destructive character. But I think because the in-ring styles, it's a much more methodical style, it's a lot slower, it's to present, obviously, the Fiend as the dominant force, at least for now, and at least against someone like Finn Balor, not as the demon. It kind of, for me, it works just because we don't really need to see Bray Wyatt selling. While I think he's great with sinister facial expressions, and I like that we kind of got the little tease of the crab move that he used to do, and kind of all the little nuances he used to do. But I think, yeah, for me, it was mask or nothing at all. The only time I ever want to see him not wrestle in a mask is if we get the Firefly Funhouse presenter Bray Wyatt ever in a match. And if he does, I mean, with that, it's the kind of thing where I can accept that character going in, getting completely destroyed, and then the Fiend seeking retribution and being this complete split personality. Where, again, we don't know if it is a split personality, it might be two different people, you never know. But if he does the full thing where the Firefly Funhouse presenter is much like Finn Balor, and that without the full demonic persona, he doesn't do that well in the ring, and then he does it the Fiend, I can accept that. But I think right now, having the mask on him, having him presented the way he is, and just kind of letting him go in there and work at his own pace, I think everyone's so encapsulated that even if the ring work wasn't, I don't think I noticed it being any lesser than it was before, but even if it was any lesser, I think it would be accepted just because the character is so perfect.
Yeah, I thought it was cool to see him wrestle in the mask as well. I think it goes with the persona, and I think that eventually you could see something worked up to where maybe eventually someone in a match takes the mask off of Bray, and maybe that maybe that's his weakness. If you can get the mask off, it makes him human, or whatever they want to do with that character. But yeah, I thought the mask was a cool touch to see him actually wrestling in it. Made him much more imposing and intimidating. We also, one big difference was the use of the Mandible Claw as his finisher. We'd seen him use it on his attacks on Raw, but we weren't really sure. At least I wasn't expecting to see him use that as a full-time finisher. He did go for Sister Abigail in the match, but then Balor got out of it and kind of started a little comeback there in the match, so we didn't see him hit Sister Abigail. So maybe he'll use that as a backup finisher, or maybe we'll see the Mandible Claw full-time. What did you think of of kind of the move set and some of the differences in Bray's in-ring performance that we saw compared to, now as the Fiend compared to the Bray Wyatt of old. And do you have a preference? What do you think of the Mandible Claw compared to the Sister Abigail?
Yeah, that's the one thing. I've been going on about how perfect the character is, and I mean, I can accept it anyway, but it's the one thing that I had a real soft spot for the Sister Abigail, just because I like wrestling moves that can come out of nowhere. And I know that the Mandible Claw does, but it's not got the same impact. Again, I'm always leaning more towards the kind of snap, I like the neck snap actually, but I'm always leaning more towards the kind of things that can just be done in an instant and they come out of nowhere, like the RKO, like the Sister Abigail. I would compare to that. Not many people ever kicked out of it. I think they did more towards the end, but I would have liked to have seen the Sister Abigail continue. The Mandible Claw I can kind of accept. I did think it was a one-off with the Mick Foley the segment. I thought that they were just doing that as like, Mick Foley can't maybe take a bump now, so we'll do the Mandible Claw, and it's a nice little, he's using someone else's finisher. What would have maybe been cool was to see him using other people's finishers, but Finn Balor's one might not be the way to do that. The coup de grace might not be perfect for that situation. One thing I will say about the Mandible Claw, I'm coming round to it more thanks to a Sportskeeda writer here that I need to give a shout out to, is Daniel Wood. He wrote an article expanding on the thing I was talking about earlier in the ghost story. And one of the things that the Man in the Woods done in that ghost story was Bray Wyatt said that he had an alligator in one hand. And what Daniel said was maybe the alligator is the Mandible Claw because, funnily enough, it was in his right hand. His right hand is the hand that does the Mandible Claw, and his right hand is also the hand with the glove that says hurt on it. So I was like, oh, that may have kind of brought me around more to the idea. It might be a long way to go about it, and it might be coincidence after coincidence, but it's the storyline that I'm gonna take and say, oh yeah, that kind of gets me on board with the Mandible Claw. I do hope that we see the Sister Abigail in the future, even if it gets renamed. I wouldn't be completely against that, but I think it is a better finisher. But the presentation, I'm not going to complain about not liking the finishing move, because I feel like if I pick that as the one thing to complain about, then I mean, I like so much about it that I might as well just accept that not everything's going to go my way. I can't have the character 100% as I would like it, so I'll take 99%. What about you? What did you think?
I liked them in Claw. I was like you, when he used it on Foley, I thought it was just because it was Foley, and so, using his own finisher against him. So I wasn't expecting him to use it as part of his moveset. I like the idea of him as the Fiend having something different compared to Bray Wyatt. So maybe not using the Sister Abigail, but using something different. I'm like you, I'm not sure how I feel about the Mandible Claw itself as a finisher for him, but you just telling the story of the guy with the alligator on his hand, that actually kind of makes me get into it a little more. Like you said, where if this is going to be a character where, just like you said with that he used his right hand, which was the glove that said hurt on it, and that's the hand he used for the Mandible Claw, I didn't even make that connection. And so things like that maybe they're setting this character up where they're not going to just outright explain everything, and there's things out there for fans like us to pick up on and kind of make our own assumptions or kind of connect our own dots with things. I think that's going to make him even more interesting. And so even just from what you just told me, makes me more interested in the fact that he's using the Mandible Claw as a finisher, because, that's actually kind of cool. Like, he's using the hand that says hurt, and so he decides to stick his fingers down somebody's throat and choke them out. That makes it even more interesting to me. So when I first saw it Sunday, I was a little bit iffy, but I think I could get behind it, especially if there's some meaning attached to it, like you just alluded to.
Yeah, I think it might all be complete nonsense, and I might just be making up a lot of stuff, but a lot of my favourite movies and stuff like that are things that don't have specific endings and linear stories, and I feel like this character might just be like that, where a lot is left to the imagination of the WWE Universe. I think the character kind of lucks out in a way, and I wouldn't like to say it's luck actually, but in that even if you don't try and make those connections, like even before I'd saw the clip for 2015 and started thinking about any of these things, I still love the character. I think it's presented in a way that it still is a very, very, like, it's captivating, and people, I think even kids, I mean, kids might be terrified of it, but I think they'll still be like, oh, that's something that I need to see. Adults obviously love it. But yeah, I'm hoping that all these little stories that I'm making up actually do come to fruition and they unfold later on. But even if they don't, I'm quite happy just thinking that they're true anyway, and it makes me appreciate things like the Mandible Claw so much more.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it fun is, you know, you can kind of come up with your own connections and just like you said, the popularity of the character already. They released a Fiend box set on WWE Shop that came with, you know, a Fiend T-shirt, and it came with some stickers and some cutouts, and really actually just some kind of goofy stuff, you know, kind of in the Firefly Funhouse theme, you know, and then you got the kind of Starling Fiend T-shirt with it, but everything else was revolved around, you know, Bray Wyatt as the Funhouse host, and it sold out in like 3 hours on WWE Shop. So, you know, this monster character, this, you know, supposedly heel, you would assume, just demonic type of persona, gets a kid-themed box set, and it sells out in 3 hours. And I'm sure it probably wasn't kids ordering it, but that just goes to show the popularity of the character that really just debuted 3 days ago, and already they're selling out merchandise and special edition box sets for the character, and he's only been on TV in the ring once, you know, just SummerSlam.
Yeah. My favourite thing about that whole thing was that we actually got a little, maybe a kind of a little mini version of Firefly Funhouse in the form of the advert that Bray Wyatt done for it, and I loved that on its own. I just thought that was great having, like, you know, you could easily cheapen a character like Bray Wyatt by having them try and sell the audience something. It didn't do that at all. I loved it for what it was. Amazingly, you said it sold out there in 3 hours. Within that 3 hours and shortly after, the boxes were going on eBay for over $200 each.
Of course they were.
Yeah, exactly. But my favourite thing, I think, is going to be this year at Halloween, seeing how many Fiends there are, because I think it's going to be one of those characters that I wouldn't like to say transcends wrestling. That might be quite an overstatement, but I do think that because, like, the mask is created by people at Tom Savini Studios, and the lantern was as well. Was two special effects artists from Tom Savini Studios, and Tom Savini has a huge following, done the recent Slipknot masks and has done a lot of horror movie masks. I think just because the presentation of this character, and obviously you've got the mask and then the striped trousers and stuff, it's such an easy character for kids to dress up as, and adults, if they go and buy one of the masks, that, again, WWE were quite clever in getting them released right before, over SummerSlam weekend, so a day before the first match took place. I think that's the kind of thing that come October 31st we're going to be seeing a lot of people in Fiend masks, and even not just Halloween. I think they've maybe got this character perfect, that it's going to be the most sinister character ever. Everybody thinks it's cool, no matter if you're kid, adult, wrestling fan, and I think even non-wrestling fans that see the character might be interested and might click on YouTube clips. I just think, yeah, in terms of merch, this is going to be the kind of character that they could... I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes the kind of character they release t-shirt after t-shirt after t-shirt, all of them sell out, and they become like the new day, or John Cena, or even Rusev for a while was selling out a lot of merch. I just think the possibilities are limitless for this character and for merchandise.
Well, let's talk a little bit about kind of where we go from here with the character. You know, you got the big debut at SummerSlam, and then, interestingly, he's not on Raw or SmackDown this week. Not even so much as a mention, not a run-in, not a vignette. He comes in with all this hype. He's at SummerSlam, and then it's kind of radio silence all week on TV. I thought that was interesting. I don't think it's necessarily a bad move. I kind of like the idea of you never know when this guy's going to pop up. If you do know that he's going to be there, you need to be there. It's an attraction. It feels like something that you have to be there for because you don't know when he might show up or how long he'll go away for after you do see him. So I didn't think it was necessarily a bad move to keep him off the TV, especially if they're not 100% sure about where they want to take him from here. Like you said, I wouldn't want to see them just dilute the character by just having him show up on TV for really no purpose. So do you think that this Fiend character is going to be something that we see more on special occasions, maybe like an Undertaker, that he only shows up maybe before some of the big shows and starts a feud with somebody? Do you think that we'll see more Funhouse vignettes to keep the character out there in people's minds? How do you think that they're going to handle this character, or maybe I should say, how would you like for them to handle this character going forward?
I actually really hope they play the slow game with this Fiend character specifically. In terms of the Bray Wyatt Firefly Funhouse one, I'm not too bothered if they do dilute that and keep the Fiend special, but I think it acted as the perfect hook for me because after SummerSlam, I mean, SummerSlam was a great card anyway, but after SummerSlam, my main motivation for watching Raw and then subsequently SmackDown when he didn't show up was the Fiend and Bray Wyatt. After that though, after SmackDown last, I wasn't too disappointed that we hadn't seen him, so I think it's a good hook. If I'm going to watch the show for the Fiend and then really enjoy everything else that happens, specifically on Raw, I thought Raw was a really good show, but if I'm going to watch that in the hope that the Fiend turns up, not see him but still enjoy the show, I think he's doing his job. In terms of what he does next, I mean, I want to see a lot more of him, but I don't. So I hope that whatever he does next, I'd like to see him maybe turn up. Maybe not. I mean, I wouldn't complain if he turns up on Raw, but maybe not before the first SmackDown on Fox. There's a lot of former superstars and legends that are going to be on that show. So take your pick. I mean, I don't know how healthy Sting is, but I would absolutely love him to have a segment with Sting and destroy Sting. And I say that as a massive fan of Sting. What I'd originally wanted to happen at SummerSlam, and again, this was a wee bit of fantasy booking on my part that was never going to happen, but I was kind of hoping that Goldberg versus Dolph Ziggler would go on last. Goldberg would squash Dolph Ziggler as he did. Nothing against Dolph Ziggler. I just kind of thought that was the way they were going to go with it. But I was kind of hoping they would do that. Goldberg would celebrate, and then boom, lights out. Bray Wyatt just squashes Goldberg. Or even if he done it to Brock Lesnar. But I kind of appreciate why they wouldn't do that. You know, you do still want a bit of a slow build. Yeah, I would like to see him soon, but at the same time, if they save it for the first SmackDown on Fox, the pop will be huge no matter who he attacks, and you can take your pick. Specifically, if they had him lay out someone like Hulk Hogan, Sting, Goldberg, I think they could really... I mean, they could do one 30-second segment with him, everyone would be sold, and then again, after that, it wouldn't really matter when you seen him. But yeah, I kind of hope they do keep it special. We don't see him every week. If we do, then it has to just be the Bray Wyatt unmasked Firefly Funhouse character. And the Fiend, like I said earlier, have him only wrestle on pay-per-views. If he wrestles on Raw or SmackDown, it has to be a really special occasion, and it really has to be a main event singles match. Never have this guy in a tag team. The only thing that I would think, if he was ever to be in any kind of tag team or anything like that, put him in a faction. I wouldn't be too averse to seeing people join him. I've always been, this is a very unpopular opinion, I don't think many people agree with me, but I've always said I would like to see the Ascension repackaged and put with Bray Wyatt. I think, yeah, that's normally the reaction I get from that. But yeah, I'd kind of maybe like to see if they were to do something like that in the future, but for now, I'm quite happy to just let them take it slow, have just the Fiend turn up and destroy people whenever he wants, but not too often. And yeah, the odd Firefly Funhouse segment will do me. What about you? Are you thinking that we should see him a lot more, or would you think less is better as well?
Yeah, I definitely think less is more. As far as your Ascension suggestion, I think it's not a terrible suggestion. They've already got the creepy face paint and stuff going on, but but aside from that, I agree with you. I think it's great marketing as far as not having him on television. Just like you said, they had all this hype around him, and then you watch Raw and you watch SmackDown hoping to see him, and maybe he's not on there, but you get to see a good show, and hopefully I would think the WWE's thought is that the fans or the viewer buys into something else that they saw during that 2 or 3 hour show, and that hooks them to get them come back the next week, that not only are they hoping to see the Fiend, but also if he's not there, well, I also liked, this that I saw, or I like the Club, or I like this Seth Rollins guy that I saw on there. So they come back for some of the regulars, and they kind of hold him back. I liken it kind of to like a murder mystery TV show. The killer is not always on every episode. You watch it hoping that the killer does something, or there's some type of new information that comes out, or you see the killer, but he's not on every episode, and it still keeps you coming back. And I think the Fiend character is kind of is like that. It's the main character in a horror movie. You keep kind of waiting for a glimpse for him, but he may not show up in every episode and every week on TV, and so that'll give you a reason to watch the next week to see if he's going to show up and do something to move the story forward. So I think it's good marketing on their part. The one thing that I don't want to see them do is I don't want them to make the Fiend and Bray Wyatt both in-ring competitors like they did with Finn Balor and the Demon King. I think that actually hurt Finn Balor's character. I think that may be part of the reason why he hasn't achieved the success that a lot of fans were hoping for, or think he's capable of, is because when he's not the Demon, he's not as interesting. And it's almost like, since he wins when he's the Demon, why doesn't he just come out as the Demon every match? And then so therefore he's going to win every match. As far as, I guess, kayfabe wise, as a fan, you think, well, why isn't he just the Demon all the time? He wins every match when he's the Demon. So I don't want them to do that with Bray. I'm fine with him being Bray Wyatt in the Funhouse vignettes, or even in the arena. Maybe even he does like a backstage angle, or does a promo in the ring as Bray Wyatt, but I hope that he never wrestles as an in-ring competitor as Bray Wyatt, and then also wrestles as the Fiend, as if they're two different characters or personas. I hope that anytime he's in the ring and he's in a feud with someone, he's always the Fiend when he's interacting with that person, unless it's like a vignette or something backstage. But so using the Fiend as kind of a split personality, but not separating the two to where, well, he can only win matches when he's the Fiend, or he can only, be taken seriously as the Fiend character, like I said, like they've done with Balor, which I think has kind of hindered him a little bit. So I'm hoping that they don't go that route with Bray. I hope that we see him just as the Fiend for the most part, aside from maybe some promos or things like that.
Yeah, well, with the Finn Balor thing, I think the main thing, and like I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't mind seeing him compete as Bray Wyatt, but that is dangerous territory because, with the Finn Balor thing, he went as the Demon against Baron Corbin in a completely meaningless match. I mean, I wouldn't like to say any match is meaningless, but in comparison to the title matches that he's had, where it's like, oh, he's not in the Demon makeup, so he's losing. And it just kind of gives away the ending straight away. So yeah, I definitely would agree with that now that I think about it. Yeah, have the Fiend as the only in-ring performer and the guy who is kind of acting out the sinister side of the Bray Wyatt Firefly Funhouse character. I would definitely agree with that.
Right. Yeah, just like, I know we're not talking about Finn Balor, but to your point, perfect example is when he fought Brock Lesnar for the title.
Yeah.
Why would he not be the Demon for that match? And so when he just came out as regular Finn Balor, who I'm a fan of, but WWE has already conditioned us to think that, well, if he's Finn Balor and it's a big match, he's probably going to lose. If he's the Demon, he's going to win. But if he's not coming out in the paint, it's probably not likely that he's going to take down somebody in a big match like a Brock Lesnar. You know, he was the Demon when he beat Seth Rollins. He, was the Demon when he defended the Intercontinental title in Saudi Arabia. Those types of things. So it's not Finn Balor's fault, but the WWE creative has kind of conditioned fans to view him in that light, and so I don't want the same thing to happen, to Bray Wyatt.
No, and I think that's the interesting thing that everyone was saying they really wanted the Fiend against the Demon at SummerSlam, and it's not SummerSlam without the Demon showing up. I'm glad they didn't. I think they would have booked themselves into a little bit of a corner. As much as I think everyone would have been behind the Fiend and wouldn't have been too upset that the Demon had lost, I think you've got years to tell that story, permitting that none of them get any kind of terrible injury or none of them leaves the company. I'm quite happy that they had him beat Finn Balor convincingly, but it wasn't exactly a squash match. The Demon can come up in the future. They can have the Fiend versus the Demon, and that, if they book both of them right and have both of them in undefeated streaks, again, just the Demon on the undefeated streak because Finn Balor, that's long gone. But if they had that, that's a WrestleMania main event type match that you could have in the future if you build them both correctly.
Oh yeah, I personally even wouldn't mind. We know that reportedly Finn Balor's asked for some time off, so I think that he's probably going to be off TV for a couple of months. Give the Fiend, maybe he has one other little mini feud and has one match, maybe at like a Survivor Series or something. I would be fine with then, after a couple of months off, Balor comes back as the Demon to feud with the Fiend, and then I would be fine with the Fiend being the person to defeat the Demon, to give the Demon King his first loss. I think that would put the Fiend over huge. It would maybe allow Balor to kind of disassociate a little bit from the Demon King and really kind of find his way just as Finn Balor and kind of put that in the rear view and go from there. So I think that would be a really cool angle, is to have them two involved. And like I said, if that were the case, I think I would be in favor of having the Fiend defeat the Demon King and kind of putting an end to that persona for Finn Balor. Plus, I think they're a little bit, in some fans' eyes, they may even be a little bit too similar to have Finn Balor and the Demon King and then also have Bray Wyatt and the Fiend. So just kind of have them collide, and then one goes away forever and the other one moves on.
Yeah, definitely. I'd 100% agree with that. I don't think anyone, as maybe the biggest Finn Balor fan on the planet, would say, oh no, the Demon King shouldn't ever be beaten, and if they came up against the Fiend, then the Demon should win. I don't think anyone else would really agree with that unless they were a huge Finn Balor fan. But yeah, I would say that match, I think, has to happen at some point down the road. I would prefer it was down the road a bit, like you said, just chuck another little feud in there, let the Demon take on someone else and demolish them, and then if you want to do that, I mean, there's Royal Rumble, there's WrestleMania, and there's SummerSlam next year. That could easily main event any of them, for me anyway.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, I appreciate you joining me. I've enjoyed our conversation. I hope our listeners have enjoyed us talking about Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, as well. Before we go, tell us where we can find you on social media, some of the work you're doing with Sportskeeda. Tell us a little bit about where the listeners can find you and some of your work.
Yeah, man, thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me on. It was absolutely brilliant chatting to you. I mean, I would never say no to chatting about someone like The Fiend or Bray Wyatt, because it was just great fun getting to discuss the character more. For me, in terms of Sportskeeda, if you want to search my profile on there, I'm just Gary Cassidy. That's GaryCassidy. I'm also on Sportskeeda's YouTube, as you mentioned earlier, doing Dropkick DiSKussions. Not this segment of it, but the segment where we have guests on from around the world of professional wrestling, sports entertainment. Our most recent one, the interview has just gone up, and that's with Chris Van Vliet, who's the AEW backstage announcer, and that's doing him a disservice. He's done a load of interviews. He's got a huge broadcast career. Spoke to The Rock, John Cena, everyone like that. That interview has just dropped today, actually. So, yeah, definitely check that out. As for social media, I'm Conscious Gary, CONSCIOUS, and then GARY. And on that, yeah, you'll just see me chatting about wrestling all the time and posting all my articles, most of which are about The Fiend. So if you like this, then definitely check it out. And thanks again, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. We'll have to do it again sometime. And again, appreciate everybody else listening in. If you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Korey Gunz, KoreyGunz. And like I said at the top of the show, make sure if you haven't already to subscribe to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel so that you can get updates and notifications on all the newest content being dropped, like Gary's interview segments, like me and Tom Collahue getting back together here sometime soon and dropping some more insider news and rumors for you. So make sure you go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can visit Sportskeeda.com as well. And we hope that you guys tune in next time on the next Dropkick Discussions.